time. It's hemp plot, part 2, after about 60 days. Up at Jim Davis's farm. It's about 6 feet high. Yeah, caduceus at this end of the lot, they were.
What's that?
There are signs of
They're all set out in lots of about 8 metres by 3 metres. There are 60 different plots. Now they had to cut down 30 plots just after Christmas. And the other 30 will be due for cutting down soon, because they're just, well, they're starting to head now.
Yeah, they cut them down at the head stage, do they?
Yeah. When they start to head...
See, they're probably okay to smoke, those heads.
No, they wouldn't be less than point.
Would it be okay if I went up and squeezed one and smelled it?
Probably.
Wouldn't look too sus? That's good.
Burnley grass up at Stone 95. The Fedora variety.
How you going, Sam? Good, thanks. Still here? Oh, I think they're flowering, so they're really stanky. So these are the female flowers.
These aren't actually seeds, right? These should open up with just pollen, but then all this becomes seed.
Oh, right, okay.
That's my understanding of it. So.
Yeah. Hey, Hamish. They past flowering? This Fedora looks like. Yeah.
Well, it's meant to be.
Must be.
I thought it was meant to be just one strain.
There was seeds. Are they reusing the seeds from the crop for the next crop?
No, they're not allowed to. All that's got to be cut down. We can only use imported seed at the moment. Would you like to see 10,000 acres?
Oh, it was a strong strain.
Big. Head on it. No, that seems to be quite alright.
But then again, I could be wrong, Tony. There's hardly, you know, if they were proper seed plants, you'd rub your fingers on them and your fingers would be sticky now, you know? Your fingers aren't sticky.
No, well, I mean, they have the same appearance as the THC ones, but what you're seeing is meant to be replaced by something else that just gives a headache. So it may well be that that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think you could smoke it. I really don't. Now, see, you've got male, male, and all these other ones here are females. Male, male, female. Male, male, male. That's how I read it. It's like they've planted a male in groups of females.
Well, it was all meant to be a male. No, one. I thought it was when we were planting it. It was all a male crop.
Well, that's not male because there's no seed there. It's all flowers. It's head.
It's all head. Still, I don't know how they've done it. Growing up there, isn't it?
That's a pumpkin, isn't it?
Something, isn't it?
Tony, get back and start film across here and let me just walk out into
Okay.
filming.
Yep.
Mike here from Mike and Mel. This is the Porepunkah marijuana. We're standing amongst many trees now which are 6 foot tall, even dwarfing me. I somehow feel insignificant against the awesome power of what stands behind me here. Anyway, I'll let you keep viewing through and see what you can make of it for yourself. The crop of the future to replace pulping.
And Model Carter and Jim Davis. Sam from the Department of Ag, and Jim Davis, the agronomist who grew this crop. The paulownia trees in the background. We are heading up to the house very soon. There's a creek over there. Mount Porepunkah in the background, I think it is. Something plucked out of the centre.
Yeah.
It's a bird.
Well, it could have been a bird, yeah. Oh,
Birds like seeds. Now they still have to put hemp seed into bird mix for feeding birds.
Yeah, I realise that.
Do you know any of those people?
No.
Some of the people have come to have a look.
Well, that's true too, yeah. That's what I did for me.
Registration. And then from the Gazette. demonstration. The aspirants. Oh, well, they should be here any moment then, I wouldn't worry. The visitors.
I charge you 30 bucks to get in.
Yep.
Straight down here. That's it, you get electrocuted too, fellas.
To hear from Robert Mierisch, who's with the Swinburne University, and Robert is here in the capacity of an engineer, very interested and very much involved in the processing end of this crop, and he will talk to us a little bit later on about some of the technologies that have been looked at, can be looked at, need to be looked at to get this to be a mechanisable opportunity for 1996 farmers. Okay, what I'd like to do is start the program with Sam, just giving you some of the history as to how we got a crop in the field here. I will tell you the day-to-day activities that we did in terms of the cultivation and the farming part of it, and Hamish about the research, and then we'll go have a cup of tea or a cool drink, the sun does to us, or both, and up into our seminar room where Adrian and Robert will talk to you, and there are a few hemp products that you can have a look at up here as well. Okay, Sam, over to you.
Right, well, I'm representing the government here, I suppose. The lead in developing hemp as an industry more or less came from the private enterprise. There was quite a bit of media attention and quite a bit of hype about the crop, and a lot of it is hype, but we're hoping to get away with that, from that, by doing objective measurements. So the lead came from the private enterprise. The government responded by saying, right, if there's this much interest, we'll clear away legal and bureaucratic obstacles to private enterprise taking the running on this, and that's very much been the attitude of the government. Well, our role is to sort of keep it under control, to make sure that the results that come out of it can be used for the public benefit, but the actual trial is being done by private enterprise, by people like the Clarke Consortium. My role, more or less, as written down, is to assess and report on the site security for the Department of Health and Community Services, to assess and report on the integrity of the scientific design, to make sure that any of the measurements that are taken can then be statistically analysed and published and can be made meaningful and can be reported in the literature. To assist applicants in sourcing the seed of low THC hemp varieties. These varieties are all certified to be low in THC, and we helped the applicants to import the seed and make sure it came from a reliable source. Receive and arrange for the testing of imported seed and to hold the seed for safekeeping. There's myself and Peter Clayton over there from Tatura, where it's our responsibility to take the seed, to store it, and to deliver it to the sites when it's time for sowing. Also, it's our role to monitor the sowing of the field trials and to hold any residual seed for safekeeping, to monitor the harvest of field trials and removal or destruction of crop residues. So after this is harvested, we like to keep tabs on where it's going to, and anything that's not used will then be destroyed. And if there's a weed problem afterwards, we'll have to follow up on that. And finally, it's to collect the results that Hamish collects and collect the results from the other sites around Victoria, and to collate them, put them together, and to put them, to put them into a report, which then can be made public, can be made available to farmers or businessmen for making their decisions about whether we should go to full commercialisation. At this stage, the government's attitude is it's just very much an agronomic field trial, and there's no permission been given for full commercialisation. I know some of the applicants, like the Clarkes, would be keen to go further, but well, at this stage, it's just an agronomic trial, and then with those results, we will then make the decision to go on to the full commercialisation if the crop proves to be productive and if some final end users can be found that pay a good price that might be then attractive to farmers. So, is that all? Is there any questions?
Are there other trials being done other than hemp?
Yes, there are. The government gave permission for up to 10 sites, each of up to 1 hectare. 9 sites were approved. 7 of those were taken up, and so well, I think there are 7 sites, or there might. I just heard today that one of those sites might have backed out, so there possibly are 6. There are 6 sites through Victoria, so it covers a good geographic range from the south of the state to the west to the east to the north.
Any of those on irrigation?
There's one. Well, they can all be irrigated, including this one. There's one in the northern irrigation areas near Kerrang. They were growing it on fairly heavy salt-affected land, and they've had very poor establishment this year. They were successful this year, so they'll try again. Last year, they'll be trying again this year on the same site. This year they'll try perhaps to sow the seed a bit shallower. I think they might have sowed it a bit too deep for the type of soil.
How many plots are going to harvest the seed this year?
No, none of the sites are allowed to go to seed maturity. So this crop is flowering now, so Jim and Hamish will get in and harvest it fairly soon, next week or so. There was a crop grown near Benalla, which was again as well as successful as this one, and it was the earliest sown, and it was harvested just before Christmas.
Will you be able to put another crop after this?
Well, that's a possibility. We don't know how these varieties will respond. If they're sown this late and they flower, say within 2-3 weeks, they might not get up to any good height. So that's something we don't really know, but that's a possibility that we might be able to get more than one crop in any one year.
And what, you got a definition on male and female, or do you just mix the whole lot? You just haven't got a clue on what seed you're planting in there?
Oh no, we know what seed. It's all it's all certified seed.
So you end up still with like hermaphrodite, male and still female sitting in there. You've got 3.
Well, there were the first group of seed we imported were 5 French varieties, which were all monoecious, classed as monoecious. That's male and female on the same plant. And then we imported another 4, and all except for 1 were all classed as being monoecious with male and female on the same plant. One of them is dioecious with male and female plants. But even in the monoecious ones, whether a male and female on the same plant, there's always a very small proportion of male plants that come through. So, yeah, so that's a male plant.
Yeah, but I just sort of like, in your sparseness of growing it, if you give it a bit more space, would it produce any more, or just conglomerate like that? What's on your rootstock and actually growing the stem? Or is it better to actually...
If you vary the seeding rate, well, yeah,
well, just actually growing the stalk, is it spaced, or you got to grow it in lots like that? Or...
Well, you need to sow it fairly densely to get long, straight stalk.
Right, that's right.
If
yeah.
it was
But the stronger one, if you left it apart, it still wouldn't even produce nothing like.
Yeah, with the lower seeding rate, the stalks are much thicker. With a higher seeding rate, with a higher plant density,
Right.
they're thinner. We'd have to sit down and do a bit of work to work out where
It's
the
not
highest...
tougher, or the younger one's more better than the tougher one that gets
Well,
older.
That's where the research comes in.
Right,
That's
yeah.
where we have to sit down
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
work out which is
Yeah.
what's more advantageous to have.
Because that can
Fewer
actually,
thick stems or more.
well, it must be
thinner
younger, then it must be weaker. The tougher ones can actually mature it into a tougher fibre.
Well, see, there's a lot of core in this too, but that's where the research.
That's hollow, yeah.
That's where the research will come in.
Right out, that's the best one to research.
Excuse me, what dry you? How you dry out?
Well, at the vanilla sites.
Gonna pull cut with the.
You actually.
I might perhaps tell you now what we did over this time that it took to grow it, and you can ask questions of us both. The crop was seeded. Well, first of all, there was just a normal cultivation done. We ripped it, cultivated it, rotary hoed it, incorporated lime because their pH is around about 5.5 here, so we wanted to raise that, so we put about a couple of tonne of lime, and we pre-drilled all our fertiliser. We put around 100 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, 40 kilograms of phosphorus, and I think about 50 to 60 kilograms of potassium, because we didn't want to have any nutritional problems. We weren't about to do a nutritional trial, we wanted to make the crop grow as best as it could. So we put that in, and then we sowed the first crop on the 28th of October. The first crop being 5 varieties sown in 6 different separate plots around here, randomly selected by a biometrician from the Agriculture Department who has set this up so that it can be statistically analysed. In other words, the results that we get will be proven results and results that could be applied to commercial production of the crop and tell us what each variety will produce in terms of yield. So we sowed that first crop, which consisted of 30 plots. There were 5 varieties, 6 what we call replicates, 6 little plots all over the paddock, and they germinated in 5 days. The soil temperature was around 15 degrees when we sowed, and the day temperatures were still around only 22 degrees. On the 15th of December, we had a whopping frost, a 4-degree frost, and if you look around you at the Paulownia trees, halfway up you'll see some burnt leaves. That's the frost that walloped them, but did not affect this. At that stage it was about this high, the first crop of that.
Well, they grow them at 25,000 feet at Mount
Yeah.
Everest, yeah.
Although, in the literature, in the notes that I've given you, I gave you a specification for what the supposed experts say about the growing of this crop. One thing they say is it's frost susceptible. So far it isn't, in terms of we had a 4-degree frost and it was at its most vulnerable at this high. So that was one plus that we think we've got over this. We can grow it. Obviously our winter, I don't think it'll handle our winter too well, but certainly we can plant it early and expect to harvest it later, so than tobacco, for example. The good Lord was kind to us and walloped about 125 millimetres of rain on the crop after we put 15 millimetres just to bring up the seed. And then early December got a bit dry, so we put another 75 millimetres of irrigation on it. Over cannon irrigation, you can see the cannon down there, so we just set that up and fired it over the whole lot. Interesting things happened. We had a few problems with the cannon. Those of you who use it know when you start it up, you fire out a belt of water which flattens everything.
Flattens the whole lot.
Yeah, well we did that, and bugger me dead, that turns around, turns up and grows up again.
Yeah,
so
that's it. Yeah,
another
like
good thing
tomatoes.
about it.
Yeah.
Something without a fibrous crop was able to turn around and come back up again. So we had actually grown this crop on about 200 millimetres of water. Bearing in mind we had a good winter and good spring and there was reasonable subsoil moisture. But another myth that the literature says about these things is that they are very deep rooted. Well, I don't think we've left a hell of a lot of root and ground when these were pulled out. And they're very easy to pull out of the ground. And I think if we've seen all the photographs of the forensic people pulling crops of this out of the mountains, we see how easy they do it. I don't believe it comes into the classification of a deep-rooted crop, say something like lucerne or whatever. So it seems to have done very well on the soil moisture that we gave to it, and also what was in the soil beforehand. We harvested this crop on the 28th of December, just 60 days from sowing, and the first crop is more or less about this. Hamish, wasn't it? Yeah, really? That's these here have done better, and Hamish will tell you about these later on. So we harvested that first crop on that date. Because the plots were all over the place, and those of you who have had a chance to walk around, you'll see cut areas and growing areas and so forth. Well, they were all cut with a brush cutter. We physically bundled them up like this and picked them up and weighed them all so that we could get yield. So this crop isn't going to be cut like that. Johnny Kaluda's here. Was coming. He isn't there this afternoon, he's coming tomorrow. We are going to cut this just like we cut a hay crop. We're going to mow it, we're going to windrow it, we're going to turn it, and we're going to bale it. And we expect to do that virtually in the same time frame that we would do lucerne. Yeah? Right. Now, the other crop that Sam mentioned down at Vanilla, they have done theirs in the big 8-foot long bales. We're going to try these in the small bales. Hopefully someone else will try them in round bales. And the square bales bind very nicely, they hold together, the baler can handle them, and it just handles just like lucerne.
A part of what they're going to use for the string?
No, that's all desirable, is to break up.
They just mulch a whole lot like the leaf, the whole lot are going.
Yeah, it comes out like lengths about that long and so forth. Now part of the normal drying process is that most of the leaf dries and drops off, which is what we want to happen.
And what do you do with that? The chaff
Goes back into the paddock.
puts it back in the fodder.
So Jim, a mild conditioner wouldn't be a problem?
The second stage we thought, which would be an improvement, would be a conditioner, yes. We haven't got access to one, but we thought that would be the next step. Crush this, because that's the old process was to collect it like this by hand and put it through a breaking device, a crushing device. And we had to go at putting it through a mulcher. Firstly a garden mulcher, which we clogged up to bilio because the fiber's too strong. Then we had the Shire very generously brought in their great big Vermeer 80 horsepower mulcher, and we did a lot of damage to that too. So it's pretty tough stuff. And to get it to that stage, to chop it up to finer fibre, hammer milling probably might be the only answer there. But one of the things that Robert's team's going to be doing is looking at how we can mechanically process it. Because there's not much fun in picking it up in small bits and shoving it through a mulcher. Too labour intensive.
How will they do it overseas?
Yeah, well, that was old.
Labour, they've got lots of cheap labour.
That was labour years ago. Yeah.
Most of it's grown in Eastern Europe, and where labour's not the big
50 cents, 20.
But it is becoming that way now that they're becoming part of Europe and labour costs have gone up. They're going to have to work out mechanical means of handling that.
Jim,
same as lucerne. You get down to about 15, 12, 15% moisture.
You find that most of the leaves fall off? Or
Yes. Most of the leaves fall off. Yeah.
Rise off.
Well, the way we picked it up, or left it here, turned it by hand, and by the time we carted it into storage, there was just stalk. Very, very little.
Jim, was it a forage? He didn't try to think about a forage harvester.
No, could be. Yeah, that could be interesting.
Could be interesting,
Yeah.
particularly if it had a chopper.
Yeah. It's got to be a machine that doesn't have any exposed bearing housings, because the stuff gets around there and tangles it, and it literally ignites.
On friction.
On friction. Yeah.
Jim?
Threads out of there.
But I understand no one will insure textile places because they catch on fire regularly.
There are ways of doing it. What about insects?
Yeah, tell it.
Jim, our crop of vanilla, that dried in about 3 days. I'm running a bit late when I got here. Just saying it dried in about 3 days. It's remarkable how quickly it does dry.
This is Ian Valletta, just put your hand up. Ian is the other grower down at Vanilla, and he's like 2 weeks ahead of us in terms of all the things that he's done. And did you hear when I was extolling the virtues of your baling?
No, I just caught the end of it, Jim, yes.
So Ian's done it in the big 8 foot by 4 foot bales, and you were saying you did it after about 3 days?
Yeah, about 3 days.
It was just mowing.
Yeah, we were just mowing with a disc mower, and we had a little bit of trouble with catching on the end where we took off the windrower. But it dried remarkably quickly. I think if you pick one of these and hold it within a matter of 5 minutes, it will start to wilt. Yeah, here's an example here. And we found that it was dry enough to press one day, but the square baler wasn't there. We wanted to do some lucerne first. And we found next morning, just overnight, it had taken up a lot of moisture, and we thought it wouldn't be ready until late that afternoon, but by lunchtime it was gone. And as Jim mentioned, we found by raking it a couple of times, we managed to lose all the leaf, and that's gone back into the ground.
The leaf really is of no value, although one of the market opportunities, which Adrian will be telling you about later, they will take everything. They can incorporate everything in the product that they're making. But if the leaf doesn't turn up because of the way we've cut it and baled it, it doesn't make any difference.
It's blown away in the wind.
It doesn't make any difference. In fact, the way it does happen is that it shatters. If you did take a lot of leaf in, it would shatter and you get a lot of dust. So that's a good point that the leaf actually drops off. Now about insects, we fertilised. We didn't use any herbicide. We didn't use any insecticide. On the last few days before we harvested the first crop, we got a little bit of Heliophis, which is caterpillar, green caterpillar, in the heads. And if you wander through later and have a look, just have a look in the heads and you may see the odd caterpillar. Did no significant damage or any damage really, they were just sitting there. I mean, they do more damage to like polonias where you can see that leaves chewed out there. So, what was that? They're probably on a high and didn't meet. So that, and there's been nothing, we thought with aphids, grasshoppers are starting, they haven't been near this crop.
Possums. The only thing that'll actually ridicule it.
Well, we've got possums.
Yeah, but I see, just looking at it from the own past a little bit, seems even when it's coming into head, you're still getting a toxic growth there.
Well,
and that doesn't seem to be 0.03 or
we've had
0.3.
We've had all the tests are back, and their range 0.3 is our limit. I just had a quick look. Sam showed them to me. They range between less than 0.05 to 0.1. There wasn't anything over 0.1. So it's actually
just
like,
the aroma. Or
yeah, it smells the same.
Still gets the aroma up.
And everyone says it's like tomatoes.
0.3 is the
0.3 is the limit, and this was all less than 0.1, really, wasn't it? Yeah. And the same with Ian's crop, and presumably the others will come in the same. Yeah. So it's a genetic characteristic that's been bred into it to have low THC.
Which you will master in the future anyway. Which you will master in the future. The research stations will actually get hold of it.
Well, get it lower, you mean?
And get it to where it's got to really be markable, what you're saying.
Well, no, it's low. It's right. It's 3 times lower than it has to be. It's got nothing. You smoke that to your heart's content, and you get nothing but a headache. Right. It's just got nothing. It's worse than drinking light beer.
Higher THC level, do they make better fibre, or there's no difference in the fibre from the different
Generally, to encourage for higher THC, you prune your crop so that you get a lot of branches, because the THC is concentrated in the flower heads and ultimately in the seed. So you cultivate it to grow quite a different way. You've got a much wider spacing, and you prune it to make it branch.
But that's got to do with the seed, Jim, right?
With the seed?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been bred differently.
Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. We had an expert from Holland who's been working with it for many years, and done his PhD on the genetics of cannabis, and he said even under natural conditions cannabis doesn't have a high drug content. The drug users have selected it to be high in drug content, and the fibre users have selected it in the other direction to be low in drug content. So they've just gone the other direction.
It's a good category, yeah.
And even if this was let to run wild, it would certainly after maybe 10 years or 20 years come up to a higher level, but it still would be too low. Well, according to this expert, he said it would be even too low for the drug use. He would be satisfied with it.
But I remember the seeding rate. This was planted at 80 kilograms of seed per hectare, and achieved a plant density of
Between 300 and 400 plants per square metre.
So it's even more densely planted, say, than a wheat crop.
Yeah, I can see that.
Seed is not cheap. On the world market, about $3 a kilogram, but I think by the time we got it here, you remember what it was?
Yeah. It doesn't seed itself here, actually, with the male and female. It won't seed itself.
Oh, well, your sister
It
produce
will.
seed, all right?
It will.
Yeah, but it's,
What do you, after that, when you get that seed, what do you do with that?
well, the seed's probably an F1
Confiscated or-
hybrid, and that means it's not necessarily going to produce the same plant that you got this year. So if we got to go, we got past the next step and it went commercial, and then we wanted to grow seed in Australia, I think we're talking about a hybrid seed industry like corn and sorghum and all those crops.
Done.
Highly specialised
That's it,
industry.
yeah. You can't go any
You
further
wouldn't
than
be
that.
keeping your own seed.
How much a kilo?
So it was, the world price is about $3 a kilo, but I think by the time we got it in, it was 10 times, well not 10 times.
Well, about 40 or 50, I think. But we had because it was. I've got a few expenses here. We had to get it tested through the Seed Authority. Had to pay for that, and then we had to get permits from the health department to keep the seed. And there's a fair bit of handling involved. But of course, this is an experimental crop. If it was a commercial crop, the seed would be much cheaper. The seed might be the same as lucerne seed, I'd say. Well, yeah.
It's a big, I've got a little budget in those months that I go for you, and there's a thing on part of the
Yeah, take everything that you want.
Well, the situation is that we have 20 years of trial, at the end of which time
No picking the crop. No picking the crop.
No, no.
No. Fine, sorry.
we can grow it and see that the legalities of it are able to be processed through legislation. Now we have found substantial markets, and Adrian will be telling you about that later. We actually have orders for product, real live orders. We've collected that information so that we can go to the government and say, hey, we're really getting on with this job of proving up this product. No doubt that we can grow it. Sure, we can refine the growing, but at the current level of productivity, we have produced here around 7 tonnes per hectare of commercial fibre, and Ian has been able to do just the same down at Mella, and I'm sure the others will be doing the same. We believe that could command a price well in excess of Gleason, which is around $250 a tonne. So we're looking at something maybe twice that price, and or even better. But that's sort of a bit conservative. On that basis, we can get about $2,000 a crop, and if we get the right variety, grow 3 crops a year. We're not real, we can't sort of figure out, say exactly that now, but we can get 2 crops a year. We plant in September, we'll get a crop off by the middle of November. We plant again in the middle of November, and we get this crop. Whether we can plant another crop now and get this, we're not sure. Same like before.
Yeah, you get
possibility that it'll flower at this stage.
one.
Because this plant supposedly flowers when the day length is, the night length is 14.5 hours. 14 what's called day length sensitive. But we're still getting long days. So, but by the time March, April comes, we may be getting into well, $2,000 a hectare, about $800 an acre. 3 times a year.
That's right, so clear.
That's clear.
How big is the seed? Is it not big? Compared to a wheat seed?
About that size of a wheat seed. It's round seed. If you cut a wheat seed in half, it's sort of round as a
Yeah. But the seed is getting reduced like for like that.
It is. I guess we might like to look at a lower rate. Well, we got some examples of that was 15% germination. Sam factor was up to try and plant it right. So we sowed 6 times as much as you would have been for 85%.
Just spin
But the plants quite distinctly bigger, even though the density is lower.
So
the height is there.
Where did the seed come from?
Yeah, that's so it's the last variety which Hamish will show you. It has produced bigger plants, taller plants at wider spacings.
Is the germination rate not that good, is it?
Of that particular variety, all of the French varieties were all around 80 to 90% germination.
Yeah.
But we got some Polish and Hungarian and something else. Eastern Bloc country and stuff.
4 other varieties or other sources which the seeds
Was a bit
supply were a bit suspect.
Right. Excuse me, what's the difference is that you say you're going to do 2 crops or 3 crops? If you have to plant, say, 4 acres, instead to plant 4 acres, then you're going to list again and plant again. What does None of your that 10 bloody acres they want to last? Hawaiian stuff that really
So
goes.
it's
Hawaii,
The question is,
which is
you said
strong,
you're going to do 2 or 3 crops.
strong fibre.
If you got to the ground, what's the
Probably got the
difference
wheat.
compared to plant 2
if you're going to plant 100 acres a year
this one
and you had 100 acres, that's fine. Or if you had a contract to grow 100 acres, you'd grow it all at once. But if you had a contract to grow 100 acres and you only had 30 acres, you might grow it 3 times on the same block of land.
So if you've got a land,
Yeah.
but if you've got a land there, what is the reason you have 2, 3 crops in the same ground?
Well, just to utilise your land. 3 times the return. You get 3 times as much return in a year.
Yeah, but the question is, if you plant 4 acres,
Yeah.
as I I finish this crop and put it back again there.
Yeah.
And you do 3 crops, it's 12 acres.
Yes.
What about if you put 12 acres in one lot?
If you had the 12 acres in the first place, that's fine.
Oh,
Yeah, you've got to have the land in the first place.
You've got to have the land, mate.
No, it's had nothing but water since the initial basal application. Now the first crop we thought was probably a bit nitrogen deficient.
Yeah, just look at it on the side.
We had a lot of this effect here.
You've got to feed yourself, you're not going to just jump.
We're not too sure that that's not just a shading effect now.
Everything. So it
Because this
improves
crop
it.
had the same, the fertiliser went in for this crop a month early.
Yeah, they seem to be a big
The whole paddock
green.
was treated before the childhood, and there's no, this is done
Strong
better.
seed.
Hotter weather. This is the, yeah, but it's the, that's the second sowing.
Yeah, well that's that young
The whole
stuff.
block was
Yeah, you
split
get it
up,
up and get that.
and this was sown a month later. There wasn't a crop before this, it was just sown a month later.
Well, that's where I think it's
But the paper people might want it older.
well, I don't know about it. I haven't got into it. You're right there. What you say, the younger you can't even pull it apart.
Take the same fertiliser for the second crop?
No, you're right there. Exactly.
I wouldn't have the same, probably the same levels of phosphorus and potassium, but I put the same level of nitrogen in. Yeah. I mean, our soil's not bad anyway here for nitrogen and potassium.
That's only to push it up for that 60 days.
But potassium is an important nutrient in providing strength to plants and trees. We put a lot of potassium into those trees there, which we're growing like a crop to build their strength. And the same with this, the fibre strength is important. Potassium is important for that.
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
Too good.
all right, Hamish, where do you want to start?
University.
Tell you a bit about, and then I can kind of, if you want to follow me, I can drag you around the place and I can explain. We've got, as has been said, we've got 9 different varieties of seed here, well, plants now. 5 of them we're looking at, the French ones, so the ones that we're probably hoping to grow next year. The other 4 that we got, which they were saying before, were a little bit suspect, coming from Poland and Hungary and I think Czechoslovakia. They haven't done so well. Their seeding rates haven't been as well as we thought they were, and they took a while to establish themselves. But this crop, compared to what we had the earlier one grew in 62 days. Its average height was 1.70 m. This crop, which has only been in for about 54, 55 days, is now on average around 2 metres, 1.90 to 2 metres. Once the seed establishes itself as seedlings, in the last month we usually get between 5 to 8 centimetres of growth a day per plant. So saying you can watch grass grow, or you could sit and watch it grow, you can watch this grow. Now this top area up here, we've got some signs down. Try and watch the wooden markers when walking around, because if you remove those, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble trying to work out what's around. But that's how we've done our experiments. We've labelled every plot. We have 74 plots here, 30 of them we've harvested. There's still 44 plots. Of all the varieties, we're trying to pick out which are the best for getting the best height in a certain amount of days, which flower the earliest, and also which ones are going to flower the latest. Because, well, the ones that flower the latest are going to be the ones that hopefully grow the highest, because flowering, as most of you will know, stops the plant's growth. So if we can find out of these varieties which is the best one, I mean, that's what we're going to want.
So you haven't touched any Hawaiian seed or anything like that, or?
No.
Not at all?
The only seed we've touched has been from France and the Eastern Bloc countries.
Right.
I think there's probably stipulation on where we can actually get our seed from,
right,
because of regulations. There are a lot of seed growers in the world. England's doing some, but most of the stuff's coming from the Eastern Bloc of Europe. So, well, if you want to have a look around, you can. If you have a look, we've dug holes into here. The reason being, we've got a 2 metre buffer around the whole plot. The reason we have a buffer is when the plants grow, there is a side effect. You can even notice here how it slopes up. So we had to have a 2 metre barrier just so that we could sacrifice the plants so we could have decent results to work out what we've got. you want to have a, well, we should just go have a look at some of the different varieties. I can show you things about their flowering and their height. If you've got any questions about what's been done, I've walked through these plots more times than I probably wanted to. So I know where things are.
Yeah.
Also about the weeds, we'll have a look down the far end where you can see how where the hemp plants aren't, the weeds have been growing about the same height. But in here, these plants suppress the weeds. They don't kill them always, but they outgrow them. You can have a look, there's a lot of dock in there, a lot of grass. It doesn't affect the seedling rates because harvesting, well, there might be a tiny problem, but we find that most of the stuff when we harvest is going to fall out, like the leaves dry up and crack. So all the other things, it's mostly the broadleaf.
For the hard stuff.
It's mostly the broadleaf plants which are growing in here, so we're not going to have that much of a problem in that respect.
How are we going to harvest
You get a cross section.
No, the wheat belts, well, it depends on which part of the wheat belt, but the wheat belt's usually too south or is on the wrong side of the mountains. The reason why we're having it up here is because we're on the western side of the mountains. In the writings, the plants grow better to the west of the mountain. Irrigation, well, there's well, you want to grow it on irrigation. That's going to give you the best results. But as Jim said, basically this crop's had 200 millimetres of water. That's 75 of irrigation and 125 of God or rain. So it has been very low. Like it's a low water user. So we irrigate once a week on the weekends. It's cheaper, as most of you will know. So that's all that you need to do about irrigation.
No, they wouldn't push it down to there because you'd have flocks of people from Melbourne just scarping it. Big fences, mate, control.
Probably the only place it wouldn't go is the northwest Victoria, and I just wanted that question answered because
well,
if you want quantities of it, it's got to be going over a pretty big area, isn't it?
The thing with planting of anything, you've got to look at the topography, the slope of the land, you've got to look at the soil you're putting it in. The soil's going to be, could be a major thing with this, we're not sure. The amount of salt, where there's one of the other 6 growers is actually doing a test on saline conditions. So we'll be able to see from their research.
And the lower you get on growing this stuff, the worse it becomes. You need a bit of height, altitude to grow this stuff. Otherwise, on the coast, it doesn't exist.
There you've got a problem with salt spray and the rest.
There you've got everything, you can't grow. It's a highland.
Well, how come they grow the drug stuff anywhere up in the bloody bush?
Yeah, but that's got to be, they're not on the coast.
Find a lot of the drug stuff that they put them in pots.
They can grow it in houses.
If you can run across some little crops in the middle of nowhere, a lot of them are in their own pots. They've got self-watering systems. They've got high amounts of fertilisers. They've actually made the soil for what you want it to be. So, I mean, every area's got to be looked at individually. We're looking at the Ovens region. We'd have to do further research into other areas when we move in. So, yeah.
What's the end product? Clothing or paper or what?
Well, Adrian explained some things about it, but at the moment there are quite a few end products. One of them is the mulch mat. Other things are textiles. They're making plastics out of the inner fibre. This plant actually has 2 fibres, which we're harvesting it for. If you'll see, there's the long fibres are on the outside, in the skin of the plant, and the white inner core is a different fibre. It's quite short, but they can use this for plastic productions, for making paper, chipboard. We've got someone looking at it for chipboard because it's very, very easy to chip and to break, even at this stage. There are a lot of different things, but I think Adrian will go on and tell you more about that later on. Is this from the vine? Okay, no. Well, we'll just have... Feel free just to go and have a look. Try not to walk into the pot. It's very easy to squash it up.
Right, it's been done. You better stick with it, mate, if you're going to get your camera going. Camera's getting first of class. That's it. Well, they might wake up.
What's that? That's male. Yeah, it's got a bit of a smell to it. Yeah, that's fully male.
See this? Look. See how it's got seed through it?
Yeah. It's got a great smell to it. I mean, it's not bad, is it? Stickiness to it.
Beautiful smell.
See, that's a nice candle.
Yeah.
But no, but the smell is still... Yeah, it's still maley, that's all it is. It's just male.
Where's David?
Oh, is he? Yeah, where is he? They're a wood tree for... they're not a hardwood.
Let me take a picture of
They're
them.
a bit like a
teak.
teak type, fascia type wood. And Jim's the Australian specialist on that. And he's growing those. He's got a stand there. It's worth $2 million for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does that know?
Jim, the guy whose farm this is, he was the head of the Burnley Horticultural College. He's not your ordinary farmer.
Stay there.
It's obvious, mate. I mean, he's pushing forward new boundaries.
Yeah. Mind you, when we were doing all this, he said he doesn't know what influence Adrian and I have got, particularly Adrian in government, but he has never had such cooperation from government as in doing this.
Because they know it's going to happen. Well, that's a good compliment, mate.
That's because of our work.
That's right.
Hello.
Aye.
Hey, take it from back.
Have you met?
Some more behind it.
Oh, yeah,
David,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
the guy
yeah.
who keeps getting you whale inside.
Yeah, I know.
This or whatever. Yeah.
Things.
We'll get round
Well, these are the weeds that grew at the end of the crop.
Right.
They didn't. The crop, the hemp crop, just stopped them dead from growing up.
Yeah, the hemp crop
In fact,
won't
I
allow
think
nothing to grow under it.
you say there's some corns in here. Well, this
Yeah.
must be the bit that Jim referred to in one of his articles as being the corn crop that got smothered by the weeds, and the weeds didn't have hope in amongst the hemp.
It's also got an insecticide.
Well, it hasn't killed the flies.
Haven't killed the flies, but they didn't use any herbicides with the planting of it.
One filmed down.
Good.
Didn't take long.
Very weedy. So as long as you get a real big buffer thing of it.
Oh yeah. You guys are all to get in for a couple of group photos.
Yeah.
For use on an album cover.
Yeah. Oh, Simon and I.
The other thing is,
Big smile this time, eh? Is it flashing?
with any soil, if you treat it the right way, put the right nutrients in the right plants at the right time.
Two left. Let me take Tony Clarke with his camera, the whole kit and caboodle.
No.
Stuff like that, we'll do that, mate. That'll look good.
Yeah, who wants to hop in? Yeah.
Oh, get out of there.
Hey, be careful. You're not allowed to
You'll
crush
break
it.
it, mate.
I got it.
Take a picture of us.
It's still there.
Take a picture.
Thing is, I'm all sick, isn't it? Poor thing.
Come on, out of dinner.
Polonias are fast-growing hardwood that we use for inside wood, like finishing wood. It's very light. It's about twice the weight of balsa. It's probably got about 4 times the strength of balsa, and you can harvest it in 8 years.
You can use the leaves too, can't you?
The leaves are high in nitrogen. They're great as animal fodder. Yeah. And the thing is, they're very easy for a lot of reasons. Sorry?
Quick growers.
Quick growers, but the other thing is, if you don't get the straight wood in the first year, what you do is cut the tree off at the base and it regrows. So you can see where there's some about 12-foot plants, green plants. They used to be 12-foot trees like the ones next to them, but they weren't what I wanted, so I cut them out. They are, very much so.
bury yourself in there, right?
Yep. Just some good shots.
Pull some heads.
Yeah. Oh, it's a glide. They glide.
Actually.
You want one with a...
Back. Do you want to raise it up a bit?
Yeah.
We've got you. Yep. That's fine. Okay. You actually going to say something or just...
No,
just want your face on there?
I just thought I should be on film with my
Okay.
plants.
Have you metered for the darker area in this? I don't know how you work
No, I
this.
haven't.
Meter for your shadow. Actually, what I'll do is I'll stand there.
All I have on this,
Yeah.
I could put it on auto. It'll
Yeah.
do it automatically.
Yeah, you want to meter for the shadow area because you see how my face is in shadow here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm doing. So.
Oh, well, that's in shadow there. It's terrible. I mean, no, that,
Because you've got so much sky in the background, it's a lot of difference in light.
Then the seed is something else. What's the seed?
it's very hard to know with this one.
Yeah, it matters more with stills than it does with video, but it still matters.
Yeah. No, that's
You got it?
well, it's really back to where it was.
Okay.
I just found I put it on manual and automatic focus, and it's quite happy.
Yeah, I do it all manually because I just find once you've been doing it for a while, it's easy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you know exactly what's happening as opposed to not
No, it's not.
knowing what's happening.
Wild millet. They call it native millet.
I don't
Wild
trust
millet.
machines, that's my problem. Oh, this is nice light.
No.
Amazing what a polariser will do.
Isn't it? In its green stage. Hey?
I'm here. Well,
You're going to need to do this bit of talking about.
do you want to run the camera's on?
Can't do it.
He's coming, he's got grab, nab. All right for a start.
Yeah, I might break the camera.
Hey, you want to get them to see him too? Better have the other grower as well. No.
That would be good.
Yeah.
We got a dog in here.
Got a dog. That'd be good.
Where's Cassie?
You know, this is history. This is the beginning of a new industry, so still these photos have to be good.
I'm going to take a few. And stay put, don't move. Yeah, this is important. This is the only bit I have to do.
You should get in there too. Could be the heir to the industry.
What's the magazine? Earth Garden.
It's Earth Garden, yeah. It's where there's really going to be a market for. I think those sort of breeders more so than for a start anyway. I'll go on the other side.
Bit off centre, Tony.
I get
Bit off centre.
Oh well, make it right.
Just a little bit.
Get away from
Just go that way a little bit.
That'll be fine. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Oh, cool. Thank you. Good, yourself?
Green.
Yeah. Just have to make sure they all leave.
Still running?
Then you can walk through the hemp and work out.
You just put up the electric fences. What else do you do?
Cultivate.
Cultivate.
Yeah, work ball. All the hard yakka.
Somebody who does hard yakka. I can't see Jim doing hard yakka.
Oh no, he does. Where's your tie?
Actually, it's in the I got a black bow tie. Lives in the glove box.
That's like when I used to paint houses and things. My young brother Lowen always came and put a tie on me. Then he'd dip it in paint.
Depends on the season.
Neil, again, you're next to the camera again. Look at this. I told you he's hogging the camera.
So we better put on afternoon tea. Yes, mine, Nick Savinas. We saw your article in the Weekly Times. Good article.
Thought it was a bit over the top.
Good publicity.
I rang up and I appreciate the positive book.
We've had a pretty good chat about the growing of the crop and various ins and outs of that, and there's still plenty more that you probably want to ask, and I've spoken individually to a large number of you. And you're all welcome to re-communicate with me again over the months if you're still developing an interest in this, and I know a number of you are. But there are certain things and issues which we now have to proceed with. The fact that there are so many people here today has given us a major opportunity to step forward with the legislation that we have to get altered so this crop can be grown commercially and without fear or favour. And we have been doing a lot of lobbying with the government to A, get to this stage as we've told you, but B, get to the next commercialisation stage. We've had tremendous support from most of the, or all of the government agencies, including the people who make the legislation, in telling us how the legislation has to be changed. But there are many, many steps that have to be done to achieve that, and Adrian is going to discuss some of those with you now. From that point, there is also the issue of growing the crop. Who can grow the crop? How is it organised? How do we develop an industry? And as you all would be well aware, there are many crops that have been tried and failed because there's been no coordination or consolidation about how it's been grown, and the farmer always loses out because he gets knocked off by the market at the end of the day. He wants to give him 25 cents for something that's worth $5.50. Well, all of this build-up that we're doing through this project is to make sure that doesn't happen. There's absolutely no point in anyone thinking about growing this crop unless you can get in excess of $450 a tonne for it. And that's, we're telling the marketers that. If they want this product, that's what they've got to pay for it. That's our starting point, right? We grow up. Someone will organise it, so to have someone organise that in such a way that you can be assured of that price, you're going to need a lot of cooperation, coordination and development. I'm going to let Adrian take over from here and tell you where we've got to, tell you something about the government negotiations and some of the issues that are developing, and some of the people that we have to, not individuals, but some of the organisations that we have to work through and the sort of support that we need. Most of you heard about this today from the press and from ABC Radio and so forth. We're getting an enormous amount of support there. So we're building up a profile and a package to get this commercialised and get an industry developed. Go for it.
I've been involved mainly as a lobbyist and a marketer, and there are two elements that I've been mainly concerned about. I've known that the growing in Jim's hands will be perfect. There will be nothing that I can add, nothing I can say. It'll just be right. And that's been the case. That's been proven. We've proven again that the product is absolutely viable for Victorian farmers. The next step has been to make it a commercial viability. And that's two things: buyers for products and processors to provide the buyers with what it is they want. Do they want the fibre? Do they want the whole plant? Do they want the herd? Do they want the bast? How do they want it? Paper makers want it in a certain way, and so on. So I'm going to introduce you to two different sets of people here to talk briefly. One is Robert Mierisch, who is a senior lecturer in mechanical engineering at Swinburne University, and he's been involved in this from very early days, because unless I had his support and Swinburne's support, there wasn't that much point in going on, because I know that there is no state-of-the-art machinery for processing this product anywhere in the world. In China, where it's been consistently grown and supplies are very haphazard, it's still done mainly by hand. In Eastern Europe, it's still done by hand. The French, they didn't stop growing it ever. They knew the difference between a non-drug and a drug-filled hemp. They weren't fooled by the American chicanery. They kept growing it, but they haven't updated their machinery either. There's no modern, really modern equipment for doing this, so that's going to be Robert's task at Swinburne University. When he's said his piece, I'll introduce you to Nick Savinas of Environmentally Sound Products. They've been working on hemp from another direction. They've been working through RMIT's Food Technology Group to create foods, as well as many other products, from the hemp seed. That's been their focus, though they haven't been neglecting the rest. The hemp seed has been their interest, but their ability to capitalise on what we're doing is probably a couple of years behind you farmers and the fibre users and the paper makers, because at the moment the government has been difficult to budge. Now, as Jim said, they're all on side for the fibre, but they're very wary about the seed. So we'll let Nick talk about that. Anyway, I'll introduce Robert Mierisch now, and when Nick is finished, I'll come back and I'll talk about the progress that we have made and what needs to be done. I'll put Robert on.
Thank you. My name is Robert Mierisch, as Adrian so effectively introduced me. I'm a lecturer in mechanical engineering at Swinburne University. I'm associated with the Industrial Research Institute, Swinburne. If we've got a pen, I'll write that up just as a reminder. It's one of those horrible mnemonics, but it is an industrial research institute. We have a track record in developing robotic and other equipment for specific programming needs for industry. And we see ourselves very clearly in this project as bridging the gap between the primary producer, who does not want to be an active and large-scale processor, and the end users who currently have their own suppliers. In the case of paper making, they own their own land, they grow their own trees, they make their own wood chip, they make their own paper. Or in some cases, they recycle paper and they make addition to it, which they import. Where we can assist this entire project quite dramatically is in converting the crop you have seen today into a form that will be an addition and or replacement for wood chip in paper making or recycled paper in paper making. It adds to or replaces or both. However, the form that it must reach is not dependent on what the crop is now, it's dependent on what the end user requires. Now, what we're already doing is making all of the contacts with the people and their specific needs. Now, the paper making is fairly well advanced. We know that there are several measures of the nature of the fibre which must be met. And this is where separation of herd and bast, the bark and the stem, appears to be necessary, and yet in European countries isn't used in paper making. Now, that's something that Dr. Warwick Ravity at Amcor Research is looking at right now, and going to be using this crop for those measurements so that we can determine what parts of the plant will be received at what prices. Because let's face it, that price is what drives it. As Jim so eloquently put, unless you can get $450 a tonne, why grow it? Now, from Dr. Warwick Ravity's own lips, the world trade of paper is achieved by transporting a material called lap, which is a little bit like pizza tray boxes or egg carton material. It's thicker and it's softer, but it's that sort of material. It's lignin stripped wood chip. The lignin has to be stripped out of the wood chip. Dr. Warwick Gravity tells us that the wood chip is 50% by weight lignin and is worth about $120 a tonne. Hemp fibre, as you've seen, has a dramatically lower lignin content, under 1% on Reliably Informed, and as such is dramatically more valuable. That makes it attractive, but if we can convert it using a machine called a lap making machine into a dried product that gets shipped from a location near where it grows, the price goes up to over $1,000 a tonne. Now if we can send it out of the Arden Valley at $1,000 a tonne and grow it for $450 to $500, then everyone regionally will profit dramatically, and the end users will be tickled pink to get the sorts of supply they need, because currently they can't buy enough land to grow enough trees to meet the world demands for paper. Because 50 years ago, not enough people planted enough trees. Now, as it turns out, with Black Friday 1939, February 13th, for those of you who weren't around then, and including myself, 1/3 of this state was alight on the 13th of February 1939, and after that there were enormous ash plantations put in place. But that timber is too good to make into paper. And there are lots of people already wanting to use it as a timber resource. Now the wood chippers might very much like to have that. What we need to be able to do is to provide them with an alternative that is cost effective. Now the paper making path seems one of the most attractive, but there are two others. Swinburne Iris needs to be involved in creating a suitable pre-processing or pre-processing methods for, as yet, 3 end users: paper, mulch and textiles. The textiles we've made inquiries about. The mulch seems to be a fait accompli. Adrian will tell you more about the mulch operations, as will others no doubt in the future. But the paper and the textiles need to receive the material in a very specific form. Swinburne Iris aims during this calendar year to provide the means of processing what you've seen today to an economic, saleable material for those 2 main end users: paper and textiles. Now the Willis family of Sydney, with whom I had personal contact, Jim Willis particularly, have already manufactured and exported hemp clothing to the US. The reaction is positive. They find supply and price a difficulty. With what we can do growing this crop and processing it in this state is to meet the needs of that company, which is the largest single exporter of clothing to the US. They can't get enough, and it's too expensive to buy it from Spain or Eastern Europe. I believe from what I've seen that all of these equations can work, that we can provide the link between grower and user and make it economic. When I've achieved that by September 1st, I'll be tickled pink. But that's my current aim. Thank you for your attention. I'll hand you over to Adrian.
Now I'll ask Nick Savinas to come down and talk to you about what they've been doing and what they are looking to do.
Thanks, Adrian. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to everyone here today. Our company, Environmentally Sound Products, has for the past year and a half been lobbying both the state and federal governments to allow us to develop food products based on hemp. Now, we are interested in low THC varieties of hemp, so there's no other purpose for our products. The reason for doing so is because we believe there are a lot of nutritional benefits for consuming the seed. For those of you who've done some research, you'll find that the hemp contains a high level of essential fatty acids. Things such as omega-3, which you find in deep sea fish oil, omega-6, which you find in flaxseed oil, and omega-9, which you find in primrose oil. And all 3 are present in various quantities in hemp. And it's that aspect of the seed that we're interested in. We've been working with both the RMIT in Melbourne and the Australian Food Research Institute just on the outskirts of Werribee in developing food products. And we've come up with a couple of products which are ready basically to be launched. We've actually run trials using imported seed, and the results have been very positive. From our market research, we estimate within the first year we probably need about 5 tonnes of seed. Now, most of the crop that's been grown, all the crop that's been grown in Australia, whether Victoria, Tasmania, has been fibre orientated. So the seed yields have been very low in this case, not at all because you will have to harvest it before it goes to seed. But at this stage, it's not economical to grow the crop purely for seed. But we feel that as an extra incentive, having that potential to sell the seed makes it a worthwhile crop. Now, the international price for seed at this stage runs for $300 to $400 for Ukrainian seed, which is considered very poor quality, to up to $1,200 for Chinese seed. Having spoken to people in the United States where hemp food products are legal, as they are in Canada and in most of Europe, the feeling was that manufacturers of hemp food products would be prepared to pay more than that figure as long as they were confident that the seed they were purchasing was free of any form of contamination, whether it be pesticides or herbicides. And at this stage, they don't have that guarantee with either the Chinese seed or the Ukrainian seed. Tomorrow, I'm presenting a submission to the Premier's Drug Advisory Council, seeking an amendment to the current Drugs and Poisons Act to exempt low THC varieties of hemp from the Drugs and Poisons Act. Because unless that happens, we can't proceed, basically. The previous speaker spoke about the technology that's required for developing the hemp industry in Australia. And in some respects, hemp seed products, food products, are easier because the technology to develop the food products are there at the moment. We wouldn't have to set up any new technologies for the food products. We just make use of what's out there at the moment within the food making industry. But the legislation is a big hurdle because the seed, to many people out there, is perceived as being a threat to community health, for whether right or wrong. We feel that when you've got a seed which has very little THC, we find it difficult to... I appreciate the reasons for the concerns, but I just can't see the threat to community health. In Tasmania, there hasn't been any problem with the seed, even though they're allowed to go to seed. In Europe, they've had extensive educational campaigns that meant that you might have 1 or 2 small incidents, but generally the crops have been left untouched because those interested in other uses of the crop find that it has no effect. So what's the point of touching it? So we feel given that people such as ourselves who want to utilise the seed for food should be able to proceed further because it's one extra incentive for farmers to grow the crop. If you've got any questions, I'd be quite happy to answer them.
What sort of food, when you say food products, does that include cosmetics?
No, we're just exclusively interested in food. There are other people doing cosmetics and an excellent range. I've used the shampoos and I'm very happy with them. But for example, we can't disclose everything we're doing, but the first product we've got is a hemp food bar, similar to a sesame seed bar, which incorporates hemp and a few other seeds. And we feel that there's a very strong market out there for it. There are some of the products being sold in Northern Europe and the United States and are being very well received. Is there any other questions? Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak. If you have any questions, please feel free to see myself or George McCarthy later.
This lady, Melissa, has, from the hempery in Auckland, brought these products down to show you what can be done. This is a fraction of all of the products that can come out of hemp. And as you can see, they're very high quality, they're very useful things. I'll let her tell you about it.
The range of clothing, we get our clothing from 2 different places, both in Queensland. Jungle Party are a very well established company, therefore the quality of their hemp is a little better. Antwerp is a new company who I'm dealing with mostly, and their range has been really good, but his biggest worry at the moment is his import costs. So on Anthony's behalf, I'd like to urge everybody to get out there and do a little bit for the clothing industry. The body products come from a company called Green Earth Hemp Revival. This isn't their entire range. It's based on the hemp seed oil, as somebody else already said. And if anybody would like to come and try them, there's testers and everything here. A book. Anybody would like to have a quick look on the history and previous uses of hemp and where it's headed today. Other than that, come and see us at the Aubrey Hempery. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Melissa. You've heard time and time again the difficulty of getting supplies for the textile makers, or for everybody really. It's with the paper industry, we have to show them that it can work. They're keen to have it if it can work for them. And part of our consortium is Amcor. Part of our consortium is Swinburne. The ZSP is part of our consortium. But in order to get our permit to make this crop here, we had to bring together. We're dealing with a Liberal government. They're very business oriented. They don't want to do something that's a nice little bit of research, prove something's research and so on. They wanted to see that we could show them the possibility of an industry. And on that, we extracted the promise from them, if we can show you an industry, can we grow it commercially? And we met with the Minister of Agriculture, Bill McGrath, on Friday. We told him the progress we've made. We showed him the evidence we have that we have orders for product. And his response was, put it in a submission, cover all the different aspects that we covered in our meeting on Friday, and he will take it through Cabinet, and he expects it to be through by June the 1st for us to grow our first commercial crop in September. September the 1st is the ideal planting time in the Southern Hemisphere, so that's what we're aiming to do. There's a lot of work that we still have to do. We have to write our submission, but that's only part of it. You can't just give the government a submission and say, there you go, now it's your turn. No, we've got to then continue the education of the public and to show the government that we have the support of the public and of the farmers and of industry on a continuing basis throughout their evaluation of that submission. So, part of our submission must have in it the support of the farming community. It must also have the support of the end user community. They've got the Swinburne University preliminary letters, so they know that Swinburne is ready to do the work that's required in the middle. We got an inquiry from a Hong Kong textile company. They want to know how much they have to invest to be involved, because they can't get consistent quality or consistent supplies out of China, which is where most of the basic material for these products has come from. Some of it from Eastern Europe, some of it from France. Curiously, most of the French hemp goes to America for making paper. The Spanish hemp goes to Scotland to be made into paper. Spices are imported in that manner. What's left for textiles is coming haphazardly out of China. And the idea, the Hong Kong textile makers, just the mere sniff that there's a chance of getting consistent product out of Australia, out of Victoria, has enthused them very, very greatly. So we will be getting, part of our submission will contain a very solid order from Hong Kong. It may justify us asking the government to plant 10 or 20,000 hectares. Of course, they can say no. They might say you can only plant 5,000 hectares until you can prove that it's secure. We've got all these hurdles to go through. There's got to be constant day-to-day negotiation. We have other markets other than textiles. We have Seven Seas Technologies are producing a fibre board. They're importing coconut fibre at this moment. It's a new type of fibre board incorporating sand and waste plastic and coconut fibre. Once they get into full production, there isn't going to be enough coconut fibre. They need huge acreages of hemp because it's better fibre for their purpose. It's another market. But the market that is the most immediate, if I had 1,000 hectares of hemp now, I could sell it immediately to mulch mat, makers of this product. This is jute. He imports jute, and it isn't all that cheap. Pass that around. Into this mat can be put fertiliser and seed. It comes off the machine, the industrial use of this is more the domestic use, or a rocky hill or a cutting or something you need to vegetate. You roll out the mulch mat and there it is. Every council in Victoria and New South Wales has told the man who makes these that if he's got Australian product in that, they will order all their products from him. They will replace the plastic products, the environmentally unsound products that they are using now. He's our immediate market. Most of the hemp that's out here will go to him. What Amcor doesn't take and what Swinburne doesn't take will go to him. I think the vanilla crop and some of the Tasmanian crop will also be going to him very shortly. So you see, we have a market, and he's prepared to pay the amount that's required, Jim's been talking about, to make that a viable product for you farmers. I was able to put him in touch with another potential user of his mulch mat. Up in the Gold Coast at the moment, they've suspended all development because the tourist industry is suffering due to the invasion of the stinging insect in the sand floor. They can see that the mulch mat laid over the particular part of the beach, which is between high and low tide, for a period of about 2 or 3 weeks, will kill it at its breeding cycle, and the development up in the north, New South Wales and Queensland will be able to go ahead again. So you can see the importance of what we're doing now. It's impacting millions and millions of dollars worth of other industries in the north. And hemp is the only product that can do that because hemp is saltwater resistant, whereas these jute mats would fall apart before they completed their job. So, as Robert said, he's talked about the paper and the textile. We've got all these industries to service. We now have to convince the government that we've got to do it now. If we don't do it this year, other countries will develop technology and we'll have missed on that opportunity. America eventually will allow hemp to be grown. They'll be needing equipment and technology, and we'll have all the expertise. It isn't as if when they're growing there'll be too much hemp. There won't be too much hemp because it has so many uses. Once we've talked about, once we've satisfied the textiles and the paper and everybody else, there is a plastics industry. They are making plastic furniture, and Mercedes is making car parts out of hemp plastic right now in Germany. It's like Kevlar, like bulletproof plastic. Very, very tough stuff. It makes bumper bars and those sorts of things. And that's made out of that herd bin, which they used to throw away. Traditionally, and you'll still hear it from the government and the CSIRO today, the only part of the hemp plant is the fibre. The rest is throw away. Well, that's not true. They make paper out of it, and they make plastic boards. And they ferment it and they make alcohol fuel out of it. So, you know, it doesn't end there. Now, the way we've had to structure our business relies on the farmers' support. For us to get the government to agree to it growing and to this industry taking off, they have to see that we've got a market, but that we've got community support and we've got the farmers keen to do it. And the way to do that is to register farmers who want to do it and to take a contribution to our efforts from the farmers. And the way we've decided to do this is that farmers can become preferred tenderers. And when we're ready, when the government says yes you can grow it, we can come immediately to you and say, okay, here is the seed, here's the technique, go to it, we'll be back to take the crop. And we'll help you grow it, of course. But we need you as preferred tenderers. So, and we need a contribution from you for that. As any tenderer in any major project knows, you pay a fee to be a tenderer. Well, we're no different. So, from this group here, if you want to talk to us about that, please come up and talk to Jim or myself or my brother Tony there with the camera, and we'll give you the forms and you can do that. So, are there any questions?
The question I want to ask you, after you say you put the crop, and then the government comes around and say it's not accepted, what happens?
We're not going to put a crop until the government says we're allowed to.
Oh, right.
And that's the way it's got to be. They have said, the Minister has said he will shorten the time from 3 years to this year if we can demonstrate that that has to be. We can do that. We can do that. We can show them that there are farmers who want to grow it and there are people who want to buy it. The only thing that's missing is their acceptance of the fact that this has no drug in it and poses no threat to anybody.
Why are these security concerns when it's such low MSC? What's the point?
Well, the bureaucracy's in place. I think that's the answer to that. The bureaucracy's in place and it has to do what it has to do.
It's pretty irrational.
Yeah. The whole thing of the banning of this crop is irrational.
And all that security will mucking around now.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I had a discussion as recently as yesterday with one of the bureaucrats who informed me that Swinburne has permitted their licence for handling various scheduled illicit materials that are not allowed to be owned by people generally, which include things like cyanide and chloroform. Swinburne has allowed it to lapse, but it can be renewed for $385, and for $580 it can cover industrial hemp, which, because it is cannabis, is considered to be a drug of addiction, a Schedule 9 substance, and as such a danger. However, the government has permitted Jim, under a licence arrangement, to grow it. So we're in a strange situation between it was all illegal, even though you've been able to buy plumber's hemp at plumber's supplies every year for the last century in this state, and almost every garden tap contains it, and it's of no concern to anyone. It's technically illegal, and you need a $500 licence to be able to buy it, except no plumbers have the licence, and no one worries about that. But this government is resolving that problem, and we have only the Minister's word at this stage that it will all be resolved by the 1st of June. But we also have another critically important step to give us confidence. Jim's crop is legal. It's grown. Swinburne can buy some of it. Amcor can buy some of it. Mulchmap can buy some of it. Good. But it's still this weird security concern, electric fences, and you're not allowed to take the seeds away, but no one wants them anyway. But that's being resolved, so we have heard from the Minister. When it is resolved, 3 months later, we need to plant a very large quantity of it indeed, and that's when you come in. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Excuse me, this machine that's going to process the planting, how much is that going to cost?
That concern is for our investors, but the answer is not much, and they exist. They need only to be adapted to our local conditions, our local water supply, and our local crop. They do exist for paper making from wood fibre elsewhere in the world. Some Dutch companies have had some success with paper making without removing the lignin or otherwise altering the crop. But all the indicators in the literature suggest that it's a very straightforward practice for paper making, and we know it's a straightforward practice for textile making because it was carried out in this state in 1940 for making textiles for the European theatre of war, but it was not publicised that they were using a Schedule 9 illegal substance for making uniforms for the armies in Europe. But we were doing it. Therefore, the technology exists, it needs only to be reapplied. So what Swinburne will be doing is an information gathering and prototype machine building activity which can be done in a very short period of time and which does not have to be financed by the growers. It will be financed by the Clarke Consortium so that they can buy your crop at an agreed price and sell to the end user at what is an attractive price for both the end user and the Clarke Consortium, but they won't have any of it if they're not prepared to pay you enough to grow it. That's the 3-part arrangement with this product, as I said. Sorry to interrupt you.
Adrian, you can say something about the public awareness campaign that you're running?
Well, the public awareness campaign is well, you've probably experienced some of it already. There's been, I've been interviewed by Peter Couchman, where I was able to make a very strong distinction between industrial hemp and marijuana. He kept calling it marijuana, so I corrected him very forcefully to make absolutely certain that people understood that this was not marijuana, and that marijuana was a Mexican name for the other type of plant, which used to be called cannabis indica. We also have a paper called the Conservation Gazette, and the reporter is here somewhere, Danny Butler, and they've already done a front page spread on this project, and they'll be doing a follow-up article, and they will be, we are working on a way of getting city people to become involved by joining a hemp support group of some sort. We haven't worked out the details of that yet, but we will then have registered the names of people who wish to use hemp products in preference to other sorts of products. We anticipate we'll have tens of thousands of members of that, and I'm sure the government will be rather impressed in our submission when they see these assembled electorate by electorate, both state and federal, people who want this initiative to go ahead and are planting commercial planting to take place this year. Further to the vision that we've outlined so far, you've got to also imagine that the value adding to this crop will be done in the region where it is grown. Now that means jobs and employment in the country towns. That's an important thing to think about. Ultimately, when you consider that the huge $100 million paper plants, for instance, 60% of their activity is taking the lignin away and separating the fibre from wood chip. The rest is making paper. With hemp, that 60% isn't required. There's a little tiny bit of bleach and a few other little processes, and then you can make paper. You can do that with a small paper making machine. It doesn't have to, because of its huge investment, run at absolute maximum efficiency. It can run a little less than that. And the problem that is being researched to find out the solution with hemp, one of them is that it holds water. a little better than wood chip. Now we think that's to do with the length, because the trials that have been done with what we consider to be fibres that have been too long and have left the parenchyma cell intact. But these are things that Robert will be researching. But if you've got a small, cheaper paper mill, it doesn't matter. So imagine if you're growing hemp in your region and you just take it to the paper mill, and the paper mill makes paper is then shipped. You've got a paper mill employing people, creating wealth there, you're creating wealth in your own area. And paper then is shipped out of that region, not raw materials. Now that is a big difference that Amcor is particularly interested in participating in. Think about other areas where there's not irrigation, but there's a town water problem. We've been offered by the Glenelg Shire Council huge lots of land and town wastewater, sewage effluent. Hemp loves it. They do very, very well on it, and it won't go into the river. So these are further developments that we're going to do further down the track that will create a better environment, jobs and wealth in the country. And this is the only thing that's been possible to do with, is hemp, because of all of its uses and all of the current things that it replaces. Any more questions? We've got to end.
I might have to go back a bit further than you. One of the speakers earlier today said you had 6 plots going and they're all under irrigation. Did any one of those plots not irrigate? After dry land?
Jim, have you got a...
Same here. They're all, I think they're all irrigated. In South Australia, they tried last winter to grow a crop in the winter non-irrigated. This is a summer crop and it was a dismal failure. And, but I understand the South Australians sort of kept planting June, July, August, September, October. And they soon realised they just can't grow without water in that environment on the York Peninsula. So it's not a crop that, if you're a dryland farmer, I believe it's too risky to contemplate you got for that. At the best price we could get seed if we could import it without any oil restrictions, $240 a hectare just for the seed. Can't afford to put that in without having water.
I thought it may have dry and it didn't go as quick. Perhaps with a shorter stalk may have been a better quality.
There is something in what you're saying about that. The hemp that would go to textiles would generally come from the younger, smaller plant because it's more supple. Fibre is more supple. The paper and fibre board and so on, you tend to go for the tougher, more robust, huge one. I mean, these plants will grow to 20 feet tall if you're allowed. That's a big plant.
I've got a lot of money to put in a big dam.
Yeah.
Where I'll grow wood.
But if you can, you'll get your money back pretty quickly.
Did that before, didn't
You want to know the tonnage, how much ton you get on the hectare and all this?
These questions are for Jim.
How much?
How many tons you get on the hectare?
Of the first crop we took about 7 tonnes per hectare of hay equivalent.
7 tonnes.
Yeah.
So what probably 2 tonnes, 2 tonnes and a half per hectare.
Yeah, divided by 2.5, so you're about right, 2.5 tonnes per acre. But same as, well, a bit more than you get off the first cut of lucerne, but you get more cuts of lucerne per year. If there are no more questions, I'd just like to finish up by thanking you all for coming along today. I hope we've been able to give you some insight into what a new industry can become of this. You're also going away knowing that it's not all beer and skittles, as they say, or a bed of roses. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do, and if you get to be part of the growing team, you'll have a lot of trials and tribulations. And but at the end of the day, at least we've got a product that there's a demand for, a product that we can grow, even though we need to sophisticate the growing probably of it. But we've got the two key things. We've got a market and we've got something we can grow. Surely to goodness we can make an industry out of that, and that's what we're on about. There were the first 15 of you who came in didn't get names and addresses taken, and if you particularly want further information, which we will be sending out to you and informing you, could you come and see me and I'll get that. I think I've got Fleming, David Jeffrey, N. Gibson, Enio, Matriani, A. Foligno, A. Gallo, V. Ponce, excuse me about pronunciation, J. Lockley, Mr. or Mrs. Nankervis, M. Someone McGuffey, S. Hodgkinson, I. Walker, F. Rinaldi, J. Fraser, and S. Rosaro. Everyone else we've got, but we missed out a few people, and if you would like to be on our register, then please come and see me now and we'll fix you up. Other than that, thanks very much for coming. Safe journey home, and happy hemp throwing when we get there.
So there we are, 6 feet tall, hemp. Beautiful spot up here, isn't it?
Oh, lovely. It's a terrific property. Fantastic. Let's get going, we're pretty late now.
Yeah, do you want to take the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only got black and white. Yeah.
I just might just the beans are ready, are they?
Yeah, just about.
Get them before they go bad.
Yeah.
That's great. There we are. You're all on camera.
One giant leap for hemp kind. That's it. Is it on?
It's running.
The hemp crop. There it is. That's all, folks. That's all, folks. Piri, 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 piri. Ba-da.
That's a blend.
Those are blends.
Right.
That's a 60-40 blend.
Top for a hunt. I'm putting these on video. I haven't had a chance to put much into this already. Now, do you have jeans?
Here are jeans,
Because
and also this. Yeah, these are all the right. I'm sure it's
yeah.
Yeah, the Kima Valley, very good.
Well, we better not let yours go to seed. Where's the
Nice and light.
cannabis
much
indica?
lighter than denim.
See, I always make the distinction.
They breathe a lot better than denim, much more comfortable to wear. Much better in the wash and wear status too than denim.
So that's for both sections.
Those ones are actually both ladies, and these are both men's. I just got two different ones, a couple of different ones.
That was in the
So that's a men's shoe.
Oh, that'd be good. The treasurer of the US gave $100 million to the DuPont family to start up plastics out of oil. Was able to get his son-in-law, who had just finished his job as the master of prohibition, and it had been ended. He had nothing to do. His
Wonderful.
Man who learned all this money to DuPont suddenly turned around the Dow King.
You look nice in that.
And found how to make plastic and rails out of the hemp core. And thought,
Come up with some
hell,
really
I
nice
just
designs.
started this
Some of
company,
them
and
quite
now I've got a
plain and
competitor
simple.
that's going to eat me alive. Good,
Yes,
let's
that's what it says.
fuse the marijuana with the hemp and expand the lot. Marijuana was already upsetting a lot of people because
How much is this
when
one?
blacks and Hispanics smoked it, they broke the Jim Crow laws, which meant they looked in a white man's eyes for 3 seconds or stood on the shadow. With
Each
impunity.
garment, if it's wanted to be dyed, each garment's dyed like individually,
Yeah.
and they're all natural dyes. It's, this one's a bloodwood.
Yep.
This is a gum leaf at a particular time of the year is given this colour, and then as to a gum leaf at a different time of the year is of this colour.
Oh, right.
And this is an iron bar. And there's other ones that they use for pink. It's the good old tinner beetroot. It's a natural dye.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, look, let's have a look at some of these other products,
Yep.
because
$17 worth of
I'd like to know a little bit about them.
Would you like me to sort them out there?
Now, you've got your organic hemp soap.
Yes.
It'd only be a couple of dollars, wouldn't it?
Yeah, about $8.50.
$8.50. Oh, a couple of dollars. And these
Lip balms.
lip balms.
Lip balms.
It's hard to organise.
In 3 different fragrances and flavours. There's peppermint, there's orange, and there's lemon and lime.
Right.
The body soaps, there's 3 different types of soap. There's the plain body soap, there's a hair soap, and there is also a face and body scrub.
Hair soap, which is
On the right hand side of that tray, and yeah. Is that the body? No, on the back tray, sorry. Yeah, that's a hair, and also the white one in the middle of that's a hair as well.
Yes, which
and I use it, I've got long hair and I don't even need to use conditioner or anything afterwards. Yeah, they're really, really good.
And how much do these ones go?
$7 they retail. Yeah.
How much are you selling them
Now,
here for?
if your crop, for
Seven.
instance, is
Seven.
textile,
Yeah.
it's more valuable.
And the
Now remember, different crops will have different
found that
properties.
the body massage was
Some crops
quite
are
versatile.
suitable
People have been using it in place of Vicks. It has cajeput, which is an extract from the capsicum plant. It gives it just a little bit of warmth, and it's a lot safer to use on kids instead of Vicks.
You'll get some
Skin cleansing gel and toner, and actually those are the last that I can get of those. They've just gone out of that particular run, that range, and they're sticking more to the bars, the face and body scrubs.
Other farms will produce a crop that's really fine and supple and
which sort of soils produce the fine stuff?
Well, Jim will know that when we have completed all of the studies on all of that crop.
It's foot balm and all sorts of
All of
things.
that is to be done. The simplest, cheapest, most straightforward market we have right now is market. He wants it, he wants it right now.
Conspiracy and
Takes
seeing
it,
that.
fails,
Yeah.
puts it in the emulsion machine and have emulsion chicken syrup.
And this is good. I saw you wearing that.
Yeah, that's the antwear one of a kind.
Yeah.
There are no answers for it.
Well,
Take off of the daily leaf.
but we just don't quite know.
All right.
them.
Well, I think I better
Right, well,
But Jim is
please scrap one of these.
working on
No,
all the
no,
time,
it's
so
just
it's going to be cut.
We'll turn our camera off now.
Yep,
It's
no
had its
worries.
time. Oh, except for putting you on.
we've already
No, I'm just looking at the...
So there you are. No, you're up in Albury.
Yep, in Albury, and there are other hemperies.
It'll be
The
lying
hempery
around
started off
here,
in
but
Canberra.
Yeah.
The lady who has started the hempery in Canberra let out the agency, and she's moved up to Mackay to open another agency up there. And her brother is Anthony, who does the clothing, Antwear.
Oh, right.
So it's another family get-together type business, and they're doing all really well.
That's good. Oh, photos.
Postcards. Postcards. This fella's he's the champion smoker in his tribe in Nepal. This year I think he turns 96, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Those are the only ones of those that I have.